Now that the draft is done, it's time to turn our focus to a whole bunch of contract situations on the Minnesota Vikings. Who is getting extended? Who isn't? Let's talk about it. It's the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. Special shout out to my hashtag everydayers. Sound off if you can. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including YouTube, and also even Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today on the show, it is Twitter Thursday. Thank y'all for giving me a couple days of a break. I needed a little bit of R&R, but I'm raring to go. I almost did a podcast yesterday just because I really wanted to. So I'm ready. Let's dive into some of these contract situations. I won't get to all of them. Well, I guess I will try to, but I also have a whole bunch of questions in the mailbag, and I want to make sure that I get to those as well. It is a mailbag episode. But the reason that I'm bringing up these contract situations today is that the Vikings had a bunch of voluntary workouts. They actually have guys on the field right now, fully voluntary. Anybody who doesn't want to show up will not. But according to Alec Lewis, several interesting players did not show. Danielle Hunter, Za'Darius Smith, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson. What do all of those players have in common? That they have pending contract situations. And I want to go over that because I think a lot of times when you see a player not show up to a voluntary workout, we start throwing around the H word. Ooh, hold out. Is this going to be a schism thing? Is this going to be a big drama thing? And I want to sort of emphasize it's voluntary. So it's kind of not allowed to be drama in a way. And it's also not really a contentious move. I don't want fans to be mad. Look, if the Vikings are going to be mad, then that's on them, and I think that'd be a mistake. But for fans, understand that all of those guys stand to gain a lot of money this offseason and stand to lose that money if they get hurt in a voluntary workout. So they should minimize the amount that they practice. I know that sounds crazy, but they should minimize the amount that they practice, not because it's better for the Vikings, but because it's better for them personally. And you might be like, well, that's not very team player of them. That's selfish. Yes, absolutely. And good for them. They should try to secure the bag. Playing football is a horrifically violent sport that will affect their bodies forever. They should maximize their earnings while they can. And I personally believe everybody should try to maximize their earnings. I think that's the way the economy is healthiest. Go ask for that raise. All right. Don't be scared. So that really is those situations with Danielle Hunter, and Za'Darius Smith. I think it sounds like the Vikings are interested in extending both of them. We'll see if a deal gets done. If not, then they probably explore the trade market. Either way, I would imagine that any trade market stuff would happen after June 1st for those two players. Dalvin Cook, a lot of rumor about him possibly getting traded, almost getting traded to Miami, but then I guess that didn't work. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with Dalvin Cook, and also a report that they might cut Dalvin Cook, which I don't know if I believe that report, because it was like they might cut him before the draft. That felt a little bit like a report somebody would leak to get his trade price down. Be like, oh, well, the Vikings are just going to cut him. You definitely don't have to bid more, team that I'm bidding against. Like, that's what it read like to me. But either way, it feels very unlikely that Dalvin Cook starts the season as a Viking. He'll either get released post-June or he'll get traded. One interesting quirk with the Dolphins, although I don't know if this is necessarily going to be how this goes down, but if it were a trade with the Dolphins can't afford Dalvin Cook right now, but they will be able to after June 1st. They made a big post-June cut of Byron Jones that makes them like $13 million, but they don't get access to that cap space till June 1st, which at that point they can afford Dalvin Cook easily, but you've got to kind of figure that out. There might even be some contract reworks Dalvin Cook has to do, a lot of negotiating. There's a lot of big process stuff. And with guys like Za'Darius and Danielle Hunter, that's just stuff you weren't really going to go for before the draft. Now the draft is over and the front office can turn its attention elsewhere. You've got a lot more man hours to dedicate to this. And then the other guy that at least was in Alec Lewis's tweet was Justin Jefferson, who, again, probably is negotiating a contract extension soon if they haven't started already. They maybe even started earlier. There was a report that's like, yeah, we've already had some preliminary talks. So a contract extension, I would expect, happens around the start of camp, maybe a few days in, maybe a few days before, somewhere in there. But, you know, if Justin Jefferson blows out his ACL running on a cold field in May, that puts a wrench in those, and Justin Jefferson stands to lose a lot of money there. So him not showing up, Ace's move. That is good for you, and I think that that's totally fine. But I would not read that as some sort of confrontational action. I think that's just a safe move and a prudent thing to do when you're in the middle of a contract deal. Also, there's Kirk Cousins. What's going to happen with Kirk Cousins now that the Vikings didn't draft a first-round quarterback? A lot of you asked about that, so let's get into the mailbag, where I collect your questions every week. You can send them to me at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. You can send an email if you have something longer to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form in the show notes if you prefer. Even leave a YouTube comment. I'll probably see that too. Or maybe I'll just respond to you directly sometimes. And the first one that I'm going to answer comes from School Actuary, who asks, even if Kwesi wanted to extend Kirk 1 year, would Kirk want to accept? Feels like he could get more money playing out this year and getting a multi-year extension. Very true, and possibly a wrinkle in all of this. Here is what was interesting about the reports that came out from, I think, Ben Gessling at Access Vikings about Kirk before free agency, was that Kirk offered the Vikings... Kirk's agent, offered the Vikings a 2-year extension, so 2024 and 2025, under $40 million average per year, which if you look at what other quarterbacks are making, that's like Daniel Jones money. That's not that much. That's actually a pretty decent discount. It doesn't feel like one, but the way the cap has increased, that's like low now. And fully guaranteed for those 2 years. And the Vikings rejected it because they didn't want to be fully guaranteed for 2025. They were okay being fully guaranteed for 24, but not 25, which suggests to me, I should say, that the Vikings are okay with 1 year of fully guaranteed for Kirk, but not a second year of fully guaranteed for Kirk. Cousins was asked about this on the podium on Wednesday, by the way. And the way he talked about it, he said, like, I have to earn it, was the way that he said, like, yeah, I got to earn my future here. And then he talked about how he's kind of used to being in that circumstance. He played on a couple franchise tags. He's played in a lot of sort of pseudo contract years of, you know, I'm going into a contract year next year, so I'm going to be negotiating. So this is going to be the last year I play before I negotiate a contract. Basically every season of Cousins' career, you could argue, has like directly fed a contract negotiation. So he's used to playing like that, but I thought it was interesting. The idea of I have to earn it sort of implies to me, or suggests to me, maybe I'm reading too much into this, that Cousins doesn't expect there to be much motion on this before he plays again. Because if he says, oh, I got to go out and earn my contract, that kind of tells me that that there's not a world where he gets a contract without doing something else to earn it. You know, maybe I'm reading way too much into that. I don't know. I should put on the tinfoil hat or something. But that read like an interesting way to talk about it to me. But it's true. I mean, he does have he's played that way in his whole career. TJ Mahaffey asks, did the possibility of a post-June 1 trade of Kirk Cousins for Trey Lance go up or down after the draft? I mean, I don't know. When you go from 0.0001 to 0.0001 and a half, I don't know. I guess that's up. Probably up, I guess. But I still think it's a very, very unlikely thing. I just don't see the 49ers parting ways with Trey Lance and running into the season with probably Sam Darnold all year. Because Brock Purdy, he had Tommy John surgery, man. He said himself he doesn't even know if he plays at all in 2023, let alone for the beginning of it. So I don't really see the 49ers doing that, but I'm not plugged into. You have to listen to Locked On 49ers to know if they're actually trying to get rid of Trey Lance. I personally think that they just are going to put him in, and they're just kind of being cagey about it to throw teams off. Knicks Hall 2024. Okay. Love the Jaren Hall. I don't know anything about Bo Nix, by the way. Oregon. Yeah. I love the Jaren Hall pick and the potential outcomes it presents for the QB room. What is your impression of how the front office sees his potential? I have no idea. He's like the single guy. He and DTR are the two guys in this whole draft that don't answer the Kirk question for me. Because, like, look, if you go out, you get like Aiden O'Connell in the 6th round. It's like, okay, they're extending Kirk. They're not going to ever put anything. Aiden O'Connell's just like a random flyer. But if you go get, you draft Will Levis, it's like, oh my God, yeah, Kirk's days are definitely numbered. This is the guy. Jaren Hall falls between those two a little bit in terms, at least in my evaluation. So I don't know. I legit have no idea. I could see Kirk getting extended for a year. I could see him getting extended for 3. I could see him not doing anything and just playing out this year. And then maybe we do a rushed, hurried contract negotiation next February. I could see like all of these things playing out. I legit have no idea what happens with Kirk. I'm keen to watch and figure out, but I do not have, I could come up with a prediction, but I'm going to be honest. It would be arbitrary. I would be guessing. Look, I've got a whole bunch of other questions that I want to get to here. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about the most clutch thing that has been in my life lately, which is Built. I'm actually trying to get a little more serious about being healthy and watching what I eat, watching my calories and all that stuff. But I still get chocolatey sweet time cravings because I'm a weak man. And that is where Built has been so clutch. Like, I've been making meals that are like, they're good for you and they're good, but like deeply unsatisfying portions. Like, it's salads and stuff, it's rice. It goes through you and you're hungry again in an hour. And Built has been so clutch for letting me feel like I'm eating something unhealthy, but only 130 calories. And I know it's only 4 grams of sugar. I know it's 17 grams of protein. I'm not going to be up at night thinking I totally broke my diet. And now look, they come in absolutely amazing flavors. They taste great, covered in 100% chocolate, stuff like churro, peanut butter, brownie, cookies and cream. I'm a big fan of the peanut butter ones. That's what I'm going crazy on. I love the cookies and cream as well. I like the puffs too. They're like a marshmallowy kind. And right now, you don't even have to wait for delivery. You can go straight to Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a box for yourself. Or if you prefer, can still go to Built.com and get it delivered right to your door. Once again, that is Built.com. Thank me later. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. I really encourage you to listen for the next couple weeks here, or the next week at least. I've got interviews banked with Locked On USC, Locked On LSU, which we can talk about the new draft people, with Christopher Carter, who covered Jordan Addison at Pitt for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He also does Locked On Steelers. And special surprise interview, I guess, is what I'm going to tease it. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Special surprise interview. But it is somebody who's not in media. I'll give you that. So make sure you stick around. And also, if you want some film breakdowns, you can check out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I have a Jordan Addison film breakdown I did before the draft. That's up. You kind of have to dig through it, but you'll find it. I also have one for Jaren Hall, and I just posted one for Mekhi Blackman that I'm really happy with. So check those out. Moving on with this Twitter Thursday mailbag. Next question I'm going to answer comes from Valhalla Josh, who asks which rookies could earn starting spots by the end of the year. So outside of Addison, I think Addison is obvious, especially if you view wide receiver 3 as a starting spot, which generally I do. I think Addison is competing with KJ Osborne for wide receiver 2. Loser gets wide receiver 3. Dark horse Jalen Naylor and I guess Jalen Reagor too, but I think Rager's more of a special teamer at this juncture. Mekhi Blackman could for sure win a starting spot. I think if I had to guess right now, I would say that he needs more time than that. But by the end of the year, sure. Yeah. But I think it'll be more rotation, and defining who is and isn't a starter is going to become such an arbitrary thing. He'll get his snaps. He'll get in, I think. I think the sneaky one would probably be Dwayne McBride. He could honestly end up getting, like, I could totally see him ending up getting hot and being the hot hand in a committee, and that guy that you pick up on fantasy waivers in the middle of, bye week hell, and actually becomes the guy that makes you to the, surges you to the playoffs. Like, I could totally see Dwayne McBride randomly being that guy for a hot second. Then it goes back to Madison and you just kind of follow the hot hand. So I guess that would be my spicy answer here. I could also see a world where he doesn't make the team. He's a 7th round pick. There's no commitment there. Jettis Agent says most likely post-draft free agency moved. Will Quasey want to add another vet corner or DE if Smith is moved? So I think if you move Za'Darius Smith or Hunter or Dalvin Cook, I think their replacement maybe. I don't know. If you move Dalvin Cook, I think the running back room is still good to go. I don't think Danielle Hunter gets moved. if he does, it has to be post-June, like almost certainly. But if he does, it has to be post-June anyway, so we can kind of sit on our hands on that one for a little bit. But yeah, if you get rid of like Za'Darius Smith, you probably need his replacement. And if you get rid of Dalvin Cook, you probably want to bring in another body. I mean, the roster's at 88 right now, so they do have roster space to do it. I could see them bringing in, like a I could see them bringing in another depth O-line, like a third team O-line. I think just the numbers suggest that could be an option. They brought in a couple undrafted free agents. I feel like they might need a couple undrafted free agent tackles, but I think they might need one more guy on the interior just to complete that third team. So maybe something like that. But often it's not that guy. It's not, here's Jadeveon Clowney. It's like, here's this random, D3 dude you never heard of. There's also rookie minicamp. Sometimes that gives you depth players, guys that just come in for rookie minicamp and impress, and suddenly they're on their team, Chad Beebe style. Cooper Mack asks, a lot of talk about whether or not Addison can get off press, similar to Jettis out of the draft. What does the film say? So it's really different. I would not make this comparison. I think it's going to make your hopes too high. Justin Jefferson, the problem with him with releases wasn't that he couldn't do it. It was that we didn't see it happen a lot, because LSU gave him a ton of free releases by having him line up in the slot and having him come in motion and stuff. And that was just what LSU was trying to do to win championships. Turned out to be a great idea. We're doing a lot of that too. But it wasn't because he can't get off of press, because he can absolutely get off of press, and that has turned out. But with Jordan Addison, you do see problems against press. You do see him line up against press and just get shocked, get his pads shocked and his routes screwed up. There are also reps where he gets out of it, but I just don't think they're common enough for me to feel good about that as like a strength or anything like that. I think that is a weakness of his game, absolutely. But like what LSU did with Jefferson, there are ways to aid that schematically, and that's also a learnable skill for sure. I think it's just, his body type's going to hold him back and make it. He's going to have to work a little harder to get that release. Betty Betts says, any level of concern that playing with Pickett or Williams inflated Addison's level of play in college? Okay. I think you're asking the wrong guy, because I think I have a really hot take about this. No, if anything, the other way around. I think Jordan Addison got Kenny Pickett drafted, to be honest with you. And I certainly, if you ask a bunch of people around the Pitt circle, that's not a lonely opinion. But when you extend it to Caleb Williams, it becomes a really hot take. I have not watched all of Caleb Williams, and I got a whole bunch of flack when I did if you go watch the Addison video on my Patreon, I'm like, man, this QB, I didn't even know who he was. I was like, this QB keeps throwing bad balls. And I stand by that. Those passes were bad. I'm probably just looking at the wrong sample, right? Maybe I just found his worst games, or maybe he was hurt or something like that. So my Caleb Williams take is incomplete. But I will say that Jordan Addison did have to come back through corners a lot, and that's something that small receivers typically struggle with, and he did not struggle with, and that's very encouraging. But no, I do not think that the world was made super easy for him because he had a great quarterback or anything like that. And hey, Cousins is accurate, so even if it isn't, I don't think that that's something we need to be concerned about. The Missed Kick says, NFL teams have access to athletic data that we do not, and a common trend among Vikings draft picks is that they quote-unquote played faster than they tested. What exactly are these in-game metrics? How are they measured? How are they aggregated? So what people are usually talking, this is a great question, by the way. What people are usually talking about is actually chip tracking data. You put a GPS chip in the shoulder pads, you see the dots, the next-gen stats and all that stuff. It's that. But you actually have metrics that are proprietary, only given to teams. So publicly, we don't know it. Going off of my own eye test, I believe it though. But they will actually put together like, hey, when this dude's going as fast as he can, like what's his top actual playing speed? And I mean, you've got tracking data, so you can just like put it together. There's other like really deep analytic stuff you can do with that tracking data to get a sense for deceleration, for suddenness, agility, and all of that other stuff. That probably is I honestly think is gonna make combine data pretty obsolete soon, because it's a way better direct one-to-one translation. You're in pads. You're running in real game scenarios. We're not simulating anything. We're just looking at how fast you were and measuring it. That's way more direct, and it's going to be more reliable data on the whole. I have a bunch more questions. You guys have a whole bunch of great questions. I really want to get to them all. So let's kick this thing into overdrive. Continuing on with this Twitter Thursday edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you all for your questions, by the way. I put out the call on Monday out of a force of habit and in a state of general post-draft exhaustion delirium and totally forgot that I was taking a break. So thank you all so much for your questions, and thank you all, especially for people who, I mean, there are people who have a question in here every single week. I love you guys, and I appreciate you lots. You know who you are, and sound off if you can. The next question I'm going to take comes from Ryan Liu, who says, what goes into signing a big name undrafted free agent like Carter or Pace? Is it because they or their agents recognize the relative weakness of our linebacker core and think they have a better chance of making the roster? Yeah, that totally goes into it. Absolutely. I mean, look, like if you were an undrafted guy and you got to choose your team, you're going to leverage that to try to give yourself the best chance. I mean, a practice squad player. Well, I mean, Andre Carter made $340K, which we should talk about Andre Carter, by the way, making that. He made $340K of a signing bonus to sign with the Vikings. If he makes the team, I think he's making a minimum like $750. Like that was record-setting undrafted money, and making the team blows that money out of the water. That said, it's really hard to do. So some of it could just be, I'll just go play for the highest bidder. I don't think I'm making it, maybe I'm not drafted. Maybe I don't make a team. I don't want to risk it. How about give me, bird in hand, right? Some of it might be, I want to stay close to home. Some of it might be, there's a coach that I really want to go play with. All the reasons that a free agent would pick a team. But I do think that I can make that team and I can't make, the other team is absolutely part of it. I don't know how often players are going to go in thinking I can't make the team, though. I think NFL players, guys who play well enough to get a look from an NFL team, at a certain point, they buy into themselves enough where they go, no, I'll do it. I know I can do it. I know I'm the greatest. That's the athlete mentality that I think athletes have to have. So, can't blame them. Lord Bunghole says, odds Ivan Pace takes Troy Dye's roster spot. Man, if you look at that linebacker room, it is wide open. I could see both of those guys making the team. And you have Hicks and Asamoah, those are your starters. And then Ivan Pace, Troy Dye, who gets cut there? Troy Reeder and some undrafted guys? Yeah, I could see that being the case for sure. I could see Troy Reeder taking Troy Dye's roster spot. I could see it being the two Troys and Ivan Pace doesn't make it. I think a lot of that's going to come down to special teams, where I do think Troy Dye has an advantage there. Troy Dye is a well-known special teams guy. I believe Reeder is as well, so it'll be tough for Ivan Pace to take it over there. But hey, yeah, if you have a lights-out preseason, you make the team. That's the deal. And the linebacker room is wide open. I think Ivan Pace says you're kind of, who's the undrafted guy who's going to make the team? That's the easiest one. I should also talk about Andre Carter getting that $340K while we're on the topic of undrafted guys. That is no guarantee for him making the team. Like I said, a player who makes the team will make way more than that. No, will make significantly more than that by like they'll double that. I don't have the exact amount in front of me, but it's not $340K. So that's peanuts. And to get out of $340K being like a fraction of a minimum contract is not going to be a prohibitive thing. A lot of people say, wow, they gave him a lot of money. That must mean they really expect him to make the team. I don't think so with Andre Carter. I think Andre Carter needs a year in the weight room. And then you need to find out that if he does bulk up, does he lose any quickness? Does he lose his twitch? Because that could happen, right? You're a bigger body. Can you still move it around the same way? All of that is a major risk, and I don't see it. So for a team to get Andre Carter, the Vikings would need to cut him, and then he would either need to get signed outright to another team's 53-man roster, which if you're too skinny to play, and if you can't play special teams and stuff, they're just lighting that roster spot on fire. At a time where they probably they could have cut a draft pick to do that, right? Somebody they actually really wanted. They could have cut, somebody who's been on their team, who knows things. Like, that's an expensive thing to do that time of year. And also, or he would have to choose to be on someone else's practice squad, which I think the $340K signing bonus is locking him into a practice squad slot a little bit. I think that is what that means. But really, it's not a signal about how high they are on Andre Carter. It's the market. A lot of teams were in on him, and that's what it cost to get him, and they went, okay, we'll do it. I don't know if that's even necessarily the undrafted guy they wanted the most, but it was the most expensive undrafted guy that they wanted enough to buy, if that makes sense. I don't think that he is necessarily, I don't think he's a lock to make the team at all. I mean, maybe that quick twitch makes him a rosterable player and he just bulks up in the meantime. That's best case scenario. But I probably more so see him as a scout team and a guy on the weight room. And then we've got a sweet story next year about how he put on, 25 pounds of bulk and that he's ready to really hit the ground running in 2024. Arch asks, how do medicals that the teams have seem to avoid the public every year? For example, Porter this year, even if we saw him falling on boards in favor of Witherspoon or Gonzalez. That doesn't shock me a lot. So a lot of the medical stuff that will alarm teams will happen at the combine. That's part of the combine is all of those medical checks. And you don't get a lot of reporters like sniffing around that stuff. And it is sort of something that the players camp will really, really, really not want to get out. So there is like definitely forces at work that will want to keep that under wraps. Because, if it gets out that there's a huge medical thing, I mean, that could drop them rounds and cost them millions, right? So they're really going to be motivated not to. And, it's one thing if you suffered an injury in college on TV that everybody can see. It's another thing if you go to combine medical checks and they go, man, your ankle's weird. This is actually really dangerous. Something could happen to you. And that data goes into teams. And depending on what team, I mean, not all teams might not even have that data. So, it'll spread around because everybody talks, everybody gets drunk at the combine and blabs at a hotel bar. But that does feel like something that would be a little bit better kept under wraps to me. Makes sense, I guess. Nicholas Bartels says, not really familiar with the Brian Flores scheme, but do you think we could potentially see a big dime package with Smith, Seen, and Bynum or Ward as 11 personnel versus 11 personnel? Yes, big time. Absolutely a Brian Flores thing, going 7 DBs or 6 DBs in a linebacker and going kind of dime there. But yeah, like 4 of them are safeties or something. They've had 5 corners out there once as the Patriots. Like they will do that kind of thing all the time. And they're hunting mismatches. So call it big dime, call it nickel, call it whatever you want to call it. But it's, all right, I think Jay Ward takes that guy. I think, Byron Murphy's better against that guy. I think Andrew Booth's better against that guy. And call him a safety or an extra linebacker. Who cares? He's out there on your tight end or whatever you're going to have him do. Tony Trout says, the secondary is very young. How much difference can Flores' scheme make to drag the Vikings defense out of the basement? The key here is that they are going to YOLO blitz, and you're just going to live and die on that. And it takes a lot of the how good are these players out of it. I mean, it puts a lot on the corners, and I'm like super worried about that. And I think you're going to have games where, oops, our blitzes got picked up and our corners couldn't hold up one-on-one and we got shredded. I think that's absolutely going to happen. Hopefully you have less of that and you don't have as many games where, oops, I got shredded. So marginal improvement, I think is reasonable to hope for, but this ain't going to be a top 10 unit. They definitely don't have the dudes, and I don't think they ever were going to get the dudes in one off season. The roster was in too sorry a state, especially on the secondary. Stizo says, assuming we trade Dalvin to Miami post June 1, like we talked about before, is there a player on their roster you would want in return that they realistically could part ways with? Draft comp could go either way. So probably one of their backs if they do that. Maybe they swap like Jeff Wilson for Dalvin Cook. I could see something like that, or Mostert. I like the idea of Jeff Wilson. I think it gives a speed element. We've got McBride and Madison are a couple of thumpers. We have Ty Chandler, who's a bit of a specialist on passing downs. But I would love to get I mean, we have Wangu, but it feels like they're not as interested in him from scrimmage. Maybe he earns more on that from camp this year. But I could see Jeff Wilson coming in and shaking up a competition for that. So I guess I would say him. Somebody out of that, because that running back room now is very full. They took a guy in the 3rd round, so I would imagine they would see this as we are upgrading from so-and-so to Dalvin Cook, and yeah, we'll take the other guy in a draft pick. Anti-Gravity, and dump the contract. Anti-Gravity says, week 1, starting 3 corners. Besides Murphy, you could snap a Q stick in half and let the other 2 find their spot. I like that idea. Steel cage death match, the final 2 standing get the start. If I had to guess, the way they talk about Booth makes me feel like they really expect a lot out of him. So I'm going to guess Booth. I'm going to guess, Booth and weird safety stuff at nickel a lot of the time. Or Booth and Evans and you slide Murphy inside in 3-corner situations. I'm not giving it to Blackman yet. I do think he's raw. I'm going to get to it in a show, but if you want to know my takes with some film, head over to Patreon. Cozy asks, would you agree that compared to Spielman, Kwesi's approach to the draft as of now has been more focused on improving the team's depth and versatility rather than trying to shoot for the stars? No, I think Spielman was a lot more interested in depth picks, like the 6th and 7th rounders. I think that's the biggest thing that would like speak to that strategy, because I think Spielman was way higher on his drafts. And look, Kwesi's had a couple of drafts filled with COVID kids that, you know, with weird depth issues because of COVID. But, you know, you would always hear Rick Spielman say, man, yeah, we've got like 5th round guys in the 7th round. Of course I'm going to take a bunch. I'm going to trade a 5th round pick for 3 7th round picks. That's 3 5th round guys to me. So that's free money. And he would always feel really good about the depth of the draft, and he would use the draft to build depth. I think Kwesi right now he's building something a little more specific than that, I guess, is the way I would put it. David Kahn asks, the last one, says, did we really get sniped by Cleveland for DTR? Did we really like Zay Flowers more than Jordan Addison? Some of the rumors make me like the draft class less. Look, man, this happens. This is the draft. You love a guy and then he gets taken and you take the next guy you like. I heard rumors that they liked DTR a lot. Never heard a rumor about Jaren Hall. No idea how they felt about him, or if they had him higher and he just happened to be the guy that falls or whatever. We can't know that, but I think it's totally reasonable to be like, yeah, they liked a guy and then they took the next guy. That's what you have a draft board for, right? Everybody loved Will Anderson. Only one team got to have him. Everybody, you know, lots of people loved Jordan Addison too, but only one team got to have him. And then the other team had to take, who's the next receiver off the board? I don't know, like Kansas City ends up taking, they took an edge rusher in the 1st round. But you know, that happens. That's the draft. And saying, oh, if you believe the team when they come out and they're like, man, we got so many players that were so much higher on our board. We're so happy with everyone that fell to us. We would have taken all of those guys in the 1st round. No, that's a team just blowing smoke up these guys' butts. Don't believe the butt smoke. All right. It happens, but that's why I'm trying to come up with takes of my own. What do I think of these guys? I like Jaren Hall better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson, not by much, but by a little. Yeah, sure. If I had to choose, I could be talked out of that take pretty easily, but if I had to choose, I would have taken Jaren Hall, and I got receipts for that from before the draft, by the way. I like Jordan Addison better than Zay Flowers personally, so I'm happy with this. But I don't know. Come up with your own idea of it, and you know the Vikings will take who they take, but they've got a board. They stuck to it. That's the way the draft goes. Tomorrow is going to be Jordan Addison day a little bit. I've got the Pitt interview. I've got a Locked On USC interview. So we'll kind of do a back-to-back there, and I also just have a little bit of story time. We'll kick off, I think, the story time series with Jordan Addison, right? What better guy to do it with than the 1st-round pick? And I'll tell you how Jordan Addison came to be a Viking. Looking forward to that. I will see you all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.